say hello. My name is Josephine Nelson. I write as JS Nelson. It's my great pleasure to talk to you today about how to achieve better compliance with less surveillance. There is a lot more research behind this presentation than we'll be able to cover in 20 minutes, but this will be a taste of some of the work being done. I also have a book coming out soon on business ethics with the Oxford University Press. I think I have a very different perspective on human nature than you may hear shortly from Nino. A lot of the psychological research shows that human beings, given the right circumstances and challenges, find meaning, commitment, and purpose in work. In fact, if employees feel that their ethics and values are in line with their employers, they will take significant pay cuts to work there and are far less likely to leave the company. Conversely, 82% of employees would leave a company for one whose ethics are more in line with their own, which they equate to a better working experience and more trust between employers and employees. I'll cut to the chase here. The number one reason why employees leave their jobs is not pay, benefits, or personality conflicts. The number one reason why employees leave their jobs is because of their bosses and how they feel they're being treated on the job. If the atmosphere at the company is not good, not only will workers leave, but your best workers will leave first. Surveillance, and particularly the abuse of surveillance, drives employees out. Women, minorities, and top performers have the least tolerance for surveillance and tend to be the most negatively impacted by it. Meanwhile, the data show that employee surveillance software does not help them do their job any better. It only has limited value in job performance for the youngest and most junior of workers who frankly need the most training anyway. In short, surveillance has been a crutch for bad management and for paranoid regulators. The data on surveillance show that its overuse poisons the workplace, drives out your best employees, and leaves firms both more unprofitable and more likely to be subject to employee retaliation and sabotage. These factors drive the cycle of unethical behavior at the company, discouraging honest reports and encouraging ever-increasing and invasive surveillance. So how do we break out? We reduce surveillance and we train managers instead to engage with their employees. Yes, this takes training, empathy, and more work, but the results are spectacular. You also keep and grow all the things you cannot measure until they're gone. Employee loyalty, ethical engagement, morale, creativity, team cohesion, and even joy in work. So that's the overall framework for this discussion. Please think about what your company wants from its employees and what kind of employer it wants to be. Now, turning to the presentation, let's talk more about the dark path that we've been traveling down and why it's a problem. First, let's go to some definitions of compliance and surveillance. Then let's talk about them as methods of control and about how they can be used as window dressing for other agendas. And finally, let's end with some discussions of ethical engagement and what's at stake in being able to preserve ethical engagement within the company. As you know, when ethical engagement falls apart, compliance personnel are in an impossible situation. The same way that police officers on the highway cannot catch and ticket everyone who speeds, we depend on the existence of basic ethical behavior for the functioning of our workplaces. When that's gone, just like when no one obeys the traffic laws, our roads no longer work and our companies no longer function. We not only have to teach people the rules of the road, we have to instill in them self-regulating desire to follow those rules because they want to, even when no one is watching. In the absence of these basic conditions, there will never be enough compliance officers, cops on the beat. They will never be able to regulate the vast majority of human behavior, and the company will fall apart under its own weight of surveillance, unethical behavior, lost profits, lost opportunities, violations, and fines. We can do better. So let me talk to you a little bit about this. First, we have definitions. This is what Matthias was talking about. This is the actual definition, according to the American Law Institute, of compliance. you'll notice that it's highly rule-based. It's the set of rules, principles, controls, authorities, offices, and practices designed to ensure that the organization conforms to external and internal norms. Now think about that. To comply. What norms? How do we enforce those norms? Well, let's go there. To comply suggests a dark side even there. To comply is to conform, submit, or adapt as to a regulation or another's wishes as required or requested. In other words, this is the example in a sentence. There will be penalties against individuals who fail to comply. Let's talk about norms, right? Where are those norms coming from? Matthias and Lorenzo gave us a little bit of that too. Shareholders, expectations there, regulators, and the management philosophy is also a really important part of this. There's a need for control and a desire for results. Surveillance. This is a large part of how we are implementing compliance programs, right? What is surveillance? Surveillance is, and here's the definition, close observation, especially of a suspected spy or criminal. What kind of message does that give your employees? That they are suspected spies or criminals. The example, he found himself put under surveillance by military intelligence. So now let's talk about methods of control, right? We are in this situation where businesses feel as though, and there are some quotes here, data is the new oil, right? Businesses need something tangible they can latch onto and implement. They need to feel that they are doing something, right? What are they doing? They're gathering data and they're analyzing that data. In data gathering, this is a problem to use surveillance. Surveillance by managers who, and this is from a criminologist, want to control decisions and concentrate resources into their own hands is problematic. Why? It's a self-perpetuating strategy. Moreover, especially now that so many of us are working from home during COVID-19, this is invasive, right? You are taking pictures of people every 5 to 10 minutes through their screens, in their kitchens, in their living rooms, in their bedrooms with their spouses and their children present. That is a whole other quality of invasiveness, of crossing lines between and boundaries for employees, and they don't like it. What else is going on? There are definite biases in the artificial intelligence. As you know, algorithms are programmed by people, and they take on all the biases of the people who program them. So we have huge problems, especially for women, minorities, creative people, with the AI surveillance. We know that Amazon, for example, is firing tens of thousands of workers per facility sometimes, just on the basis of AI. And who gets fired? People who are older, people who are disabled, people who are unable to meet the metrics for any other reason, but add diversity and add value to the company in ways that the AI has not been programmed to understand. What else happens here? Surveillance suppresses dissent, right? And then I get questions. Well, isn't surveillance really for the benefit of employees? Well, if it's for to better employee performance, then why not give that information directly to employees? If the issue is how long you've spent on Excel today versus PowerPoint versus Word, then, and there are norms here, maybe there are good reasons why this person spent more time on Excel today than on Word, because they're working from home and they knew that they were going to have a lot of interruptions, and they were being productive in the way that they should have been, right? They were choosing the activity that would give them the ability to be most productive, even with interruptions. Now, if that's a problem, why not let the employee know that they need to be more efficient in their use of Excel or something else, right? If this is about self-improvement, then give the information back to the employee. There is no reason for this to be part of a larger monitoring system. Data analytics. Now, we are really in love with data analytics. They seem powerful, they seem impartial, but they have all the same problems as the rest of our AI system, right? We think that we can show our data analytics to superiors and regulators as evidence of monitoring, that we're in control. That's not what it shows at all. It shows that we're following people, that we're spying on them. That's not in control. That's just reporting back to superiors and covering our rear ends. Finally, we have window dressing for other agendas. Really, surveillance and compliance gets used for many other purposes other than necessarily what we think its ideal purpose should be. Certainly in the US, we have a compliance system that's deeply invested in monitoring and enforcing procedures. This is Caremark and the Marchand cases. We definitely have a just do something message, right? That says, check the box, make sure that you are monitoring everything, surveilling everything, watching everything. Why? As a defensive measure. But this actually creates wrongdoing. We have all this evidence that that surveillance creates a poisonous atmosphere within the company such that it is more likely that unethical behavior will happen, right? We are pushing people into unethical behavior by virtue of this surveillance. And we have seen the examples. So we have a potentially very well-intentioned but highly legalistic program at Intel that created enormous problems and was actually cited in the indictments and the legal documents for the cases as driving the wrongdoing, right? Also, we know that surveillance is almost always used in practice against employees, to throw employees under the bus, to otherwise make cases against employees to save the company. And employees know it. When you turn on their camera remotely and you turn on their microphone remotely and you're watching everything they do, you know that they know that that's not for their benefit. They know that that's for the company to record something in a personnel file to be used against them later, right? And the research bears this out. The research shows that this breaks trust and it leads to sabotage. It makes people angry. It makes people upset. It feels like the invasion that it is. And we have seen surveillance and compliance programs be used in directly abusive ways. This was the Wells Fargo example, where the company was consistently monitoring all these metrics off of the employees and checking in with the branch offices 6 times a day and simply asking, how many accounts have you cross-sold, right? I want account after account after account. I want you to go to homeless people at bus shelters and sign them up for credit cards they can't afford, nor do they want. I want you to prey on immigrant populations. I want you to engage in all this terrible behavior because all I'm going to count is the opening of that particular, check that one box, cross that one metric off, right? And it leads to horrendous behavior. And then let's talk about ethical engagement, because this is at the core of what we need for our companies to preserve, but also for profitability. This is the core of profitability. I actually would contest the introduction that we had, that I believe it was Lorenzo and Matthias were giving, where they were talking about, oh, well, you're going to get pushback from your board. Well, maybe, maybe not. Because if they really understand the drivers of productivity and the drivers of profitability, it is diversity, creativity, innovation. It's being able to see around the corner. It's getting the best from your employees such that you can innovate and you can be the leaders of tomorrow. That's how we advance. That's the core of staying on top in a competitive marketplace. And we are killing that with surveillance. Our best people leave. Our brightest minds flee as fast as they can, right? And we get groupthink instead, which is the kiss of death for a company that needs to stay competitive, innovative, and productive, right? And I want to push back and say, this is not about reinventing the form of compliance. We've tried all kinds of things. You can teach people accounting measures, but if you have the wrong incentive systems in place, guess what you get? You get more accounting fraud because they know more accounting procedures. You can teach legal rule-based compliance, And you get more rule breaking because they think they're all lawyers and they want to skate as close to the line as possible, right? You can go through form of this after form of this. And now one of the very popular forms is this culture-based compliance. But I would argue that's actually the most dangerous. When you are talking about compliance, as in from the verb to comply, to fall in line, to satisfy expectations, to comply and do what you are told to do. The Nazis had wonderful compliance. The Nazis were able to drive the Jews and the gypsies and the homosexuals and, you know, the communists and anybody else they wanted out of public life and organizations and universities and offices. They had wonderful compliance. They had horrendously unethical results, but they got great compliance, right? So the key is about protecting the ethics of the situation, right? It's about protecting employee voice and individual engagement, to have the person who says, no, this is wrong. I will not do this. I do not want to live in East Germany. I do not want to be monitored at every moment in every way and be pushed to these unethical actions. So what you need to protect is the ability to speak up internally, right? And that's that first subtitle there. We need to protect the diversity of experiences. It's not necessarily what people look like. It's their experiences and that they feel different and other from other people so that they don't just agree with them. They don't have exactly the same background. They're rotating through departments, whether it's because they're from marketing and now they're in accounting, or they're in sales and they were something and now they're being placed somewhere else. They are an outsider and they start asking the questions about, why do we run these accounts this way? This seems very strange. How about running the accounts the other way? You need the perspective of an outsider and to rotate through these groups in order to be able to do that. That's how profits are made. Destroying groupthink is how profits are made. It's a more uncomfortable situation for employees sometimes and in the workplace sometimes, but it's a more creative process. It's a more productive process. Finally, surveillance exacerbates power differentials, right? So the most impacted groups are women, minorities, and your sources of diversity, which, as we talk about, are also your sources of profit. Finally, you need to realize that surveillance tends to elevate early warning signs of major ethical scandals, right? Turnover. Your brightest and best will leave, and they will leave the fastest. They will get the heck out of an organization that they feel does not trust them, and that they do not feel that they can invest themselves in. And that's a real shame. And that's a point that can be made to your board of directors and your CEO. You want the best out of people, then stop treating them like they are in a police state. Stop treating them as though they are the criminal or spy that you imagine they are. Instead, and that's why the title of this presentation is the subtitle is No Excuses for Poor Management. That's why we need better management. That's why you have to engage people on a human level and not allow surveillance to be a substitute for that engagement. That's not going to give you the results that you want. This is not the shortcut that people imagine that it is. We are not robots. We do not like to be managed as robots. And in fact, your best employees resent it the most and will leave the fastest. And then you are left with people who are unhappy being there, have no other choices, and will engage in sabotage, increasingly engage in sabotage, which makes it a harder and harder place to get compliant behavior in an ethical sense of compliance. If we have lost sight of the ethics of compliance, so will our employees. So thank you.